all the extra work that people have to do in the background to keep that plant going, to keep the water going. But how can you put a cost to that?
Exactly.
Realistically? Yeah. EBA is basically you're just making assumptions on assumptions to try and put numbers in front of someone.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and therefore it's hard to get investment sometimes to drive that digital twin journey. And so sometimes you just need to demonstrate. You need to almost go. It needs to be a continuous sort of loop that you go round and round. It's by incremental improvement that you gain that trust, and then therefore you get that investment. I think one of the things that we're focusing on is that the digital twin for us is not just something that you hand over at the end of our project. We've got a 5-year project only. We won't be back. We will be handing something over, but we've got to generate value from that digital twin throughout that project life cycle. And that's been mentioned in the previous the presentations today, that it's about that asset intervention at the end of the day. So driving that value right through your design piece, your integration piece, your commissioning phase, helps you then reinvest in the digital twin because you can see the value it brings, and therefore that does benefit the end user and the customer as well.
So we have someone new join our call, Stephen.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Hi, Stephen. Can you? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Apologies, my camera isn't working on my PC, but I'm really good looking.
So you can see us, but we can't see you.
I worked for Yorkshire Water for 23 years, so I'll just caught the tail end of that conversation. I work for Business Modelling Associates now, actually. I work with Mark Penny, who's just been presenting with Steve Riches on the work that we've been doing with you guys at Anglian. So it's been good to share that, really, because I think that's been quite a long engagement, with several iterations. I know that Mark sort of said it's sort of 3 to 6 months for a typical project, but we have been working with you guys for quite some time, and that model has gone through several generations and developments over time. So it's nice to see it really maturing and delivering value. Have you been involved in that project then, Guy?
Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, have you been involved in that project?
No, so I work as part of the Strategic Pipeline Alliance, which is a new alliance delivering water. We're sort of taking water from the north to the south of the region. Right. So really, I'm completely on the other side of the fence, really.
All right.
But that said, I mean, all of the systems that we use to generate everything need to be the same. So we really need to tie together what you're doing in that sludge side to what they're doing in the wastewater side to what we're doing in the water side.
So have you seen some of the work that we've done on the water side at all?
I'm starting to get some sight of that with Andy. So yeah, just starting to look into that.
Yeah. So
Stephen, thank you for joining. We're talking about how utilities measure the impact, or how do they determine the business case behind the implementation of digital twins, in both the hard numbers of monetized value that digital twins can bring, but also from the soft side, what kind of benefits does it bring to an operator that are difficult to monetize? What are your views in what is the best way to evaluate the impact of digital twin to a utility that can help build a business case for it?
So I guess my experience of digital twins sort of stretches back to when I was at Yorkshire Water, because I originally engaged Business Modelling Associates when they were a company in South Africa to come and build a suite of models for us. So Yorkshire Water at that point were the first time that BMA had been involved in the UK. So I was kind of like instrumental in developing the business case for doing a fairly significant investment in digital. They weren't referred to as digital twins then, but they were digital twins. There were digital representations of our, in one instance, the end-to-end value chain from source right the way through to sea at a strategic level, down to operational models looking at the sludge processes. So I think it's an operational level. It is more, it is in some instances, it is easier to build a business case because you can get tangible cost savings out. So you can baseline your costs for year one. And then, as Steve said, his cost for this year are £2 million less. So, the problem in a processing with a process like sludge is that your external context can change. Very much you can have external factors like the weather can significantly affect your operating costs. So, demonstrating what it would have been without that solution is sometimes a difficult thing to do. So I think in an operational context, you can optimize and you can reduce your cost base. Then the other area where you can demonstrate a business case is in cost avoidance. So can you optimize your investments or your operational maintenance in order to minimize exposure to things like fines and penalties around performance? So, Guy will be very familiar with the ODIs and the performance commitments that Ofwat have introduced and the big penalties that are associated with not driving down performance on things like leakage, pollution, mains repairs. They all carry a significant penalty. So how do you invest and optimize? How do you spread the precious resources that you've got across your asset base to ensure that you get the optimal value out and avoid those penalties? So that's another area. And I think the third thing for me is, the whole kind of like process in organisations of decision making is very cumbersome, and getting an unbiased perspective on how to take significant strategic decisions for organisations and doing that in a very agile and rapid way is another very significant benefit. If you can, I think organisations deal, particularly utilities, deal with very complex systems, and in order to deal with that complexity, they chunk them down into silos. They give general managers accountability for those silos, and they incentivise them to drive performance in those areas. Now that can lead to kind of a view of the world where you're only interested in your particular area of the business, and I think taking a more systemic view is the way to go, because, if you look at the kind of whole wastewater process or the whole water process, elements of that process upstream and downstream of each other have a very material impact on how each element performs. And it's wrong to just drive performance in, myopic performance in silos. But due to the complexity of what you're managing, organisations build structures around those systems in that way, and that then leads to suboptimal performance because everybody's just looking after their own part of the business. So if you can lift it up and do a more systemic approach and represent that within a digital twin, and certainly that's what I think where some of the benefits have come from in the sludge operating model that Mark and Steve were talking about for Anglian, is taking a more systemic view, looking at the whole process, looking at the whole asset base, looking at the movements between those assets so that you're optimizing each individual plant, not just in relation to the processing of sludge, but also the energy generation, the logistics to bring the sludge to the site, how it's blended with the indigenous sludge. How do you maximize the calorific value of the sludge going through your digesters to create your energy? All of that is a very, very complex problem, and you can't just look at one site or one element like logistics. And I think, in fact, Steve did say logistics costs went up in order to do that. So, bit of a long-winded answer, sorry, but you did ask. So I would say, cost reduction, cost avoidance, and better decision making are the three elements for me around business case development.
Excellent. That is.
Sorry, I was going to say it's a very fair point, because I know from my own experience with Severn Trent is that the amount of people that were employed within the business just to manage the management of information, people who were getting data from telemetry, converting it into different forms so different people in the business could see it. And I guess that's kind of an untapped thing that we don't think about in our business cases, but that's something that digital twin certainly help with. Yeah.
Taming that complexity, right? I think more agile, I'd like the term more agile decision making, that in a world where you have siloed information, that makes a lot of sense. I want to make sure that we have enough airtime for Mordecai, for Yuri, and for Tommy. Do you guys have any thoughts that you want to share with us on your experience? Tommy, perhaps you want to get us started?
Yeah, so yeah, I actually work also at the utility in Helsinki. So the soft side, they are quite difficult to like. The managers are like it's difficult to like calculate the costs that you was discussing about earlier here. So if you get a pollution and then you have to go and give some comments to the media and so on, it's quite difficult to like calculate the cost of it, but it's quite embarrassing to do that, and people want to avoid that. So that's one thing you want with the digital twin. You can avoid that, but when you have some like alert system to get some notifications before bad events happens, but that's very difficult to like calculate a business case from that. So it's more like the manager want to avoid those situations, but it's very difficult to give some price for that. So, but I don't know. Do you have any ideas how to like?
Well, I think that the team help solve that through their regulator, right? That is what we heard earlier today from GUI, was public perception and the regulator working in that regard. At least that is my understanding. But it makes a lot of sense. Katie, is that your experience in Ireland too? You were nodding quite a bit when that was said.
I was probably reflecting more on my UK experience. Obviously, I work in consulting over here in Ireland, so I'm a little bit removed. But yeah, it's the same. The decision making is a challenge, especially being now in consulting. So you're a layer out of the decision makes it even more of a challenge. So yeah, I concur fully.
So one thing that we've done. Sorry. I was just going to mention one thing that we've done. Where we found it quite difficult to quantify those benefits, we've looked at different models. So we do look at the sort of 6 capitals piece, and then we look at the sort of benefit realization model in terms of that financial and non-financial, where we look at cashable, non-cashable, and then we'll also look at sort of performance, that economic, social, and environmental piece, as well as enhancing the user's experience. And we really value those in Anglian, so we'll draw those out and sort of we will put them in a separate box and stand up and say, look, we do this as well, because that's exactly what our customer would expect us to do. So we can lay that alongside the customer's satisfaction piece and have quite a powerful, a powerful bit to present.
Makes sense. Yuri, any thoughts that you want to share with the team?
Yes, a few. Maybe first thing is actually, I think you're talking about the saving of the soft on the soft side. I don't think there's a hard side for a digital twin. Making a digital twin is not going to save you anything. It's only by applying it that you're going to make savings. So just having a model, just having a digital twin doesn't mean anything if you don't have people that are going to use it. So I think that's important. Then you also have the costs related to your digital twin. And I think it's rather easy to make a model or a digital twin. It's rather difficult to maintain it and keep it running. And the problem is if you don't keep it running, keep it up to date, then people are not going to use it anymore. And that's also an important aspect, and that's really essential if you want to make some savings anyhow. Because you don't want, I think in a general perspective, if you make a digital twin for just one goal, one objective, it's not worth to do it. You have to be able to reuse it multiple times to make it cost effective.
So one of the things that GUI was mentioning was, these are systems, I quote, cannot be just handed over, which speaks to that idea that there needs to be constant maintenance of these digital twins, and making sure that they, in my experience, one of the easier things to lose track of is the quality of the data, of the incoming data, especially on wastewater networks. It is easy to to forget that sensors do need maintenance, digital twins do need to be calibrated somehow. Infrastructure changes, and all of those need to be accounted for throughout the life cycle of these systems. I think that there are, it sounds like several ways of trying to quantify the value that these systems bring, but it also seems like it is important to making sure that we consider all the life cycle cost of these kind of systems, because they do cost to maintain and keep up. Mordecai, do you have, I know that you said you wanted to, your objective was to learn more, but I was wondering, do you have any thoughts that you want to share with us on what you have observed utilities wanting to get out of these kind of technologies?
Well, maybe some. Well, when we speak about digital twins, we speak about many types of applications. It's not one application, obviously. So the calculations of the benefits differ from one application to the other. For example, when I did the investigation of the benefits of an energy management system, like the operation of the water, optimization of the operation of the water system, I could do it quite easy to compare by hydraulic model. Using hydraulic model, the standard operation versus the optimized operation. So that one was relatively easy. However, when I investigated the benefits of AMI system, then it becomes much more complicated. How would AMI contribute to the reduction of leakage, improvement in the operation? And for example, one of the strange issues, one of the utilities told me that after applying AMI, they had much less lawsuits for all kinds of problems in the water from the customers. So how do you calculate this benefit? How much money did they save in lawyers and in managing attention to court? To understand. So, but this is a specific example. There is one issue we are mentioning here about the lifetime of the system, maintenance. We have to bear in mind that operating digital twins application, you need maybe different skills from the operators. You cannot take the current operator from the control room, which is used to operate the system based on levels and pressure and or maybe schedule, one that is running a model which is much more sophisticated, and it needs to understand how to operate the software and how to deal with all kinds of decisions resulting from the schedule. This is one example, obviously, but dealing with the software, the sophistication of the models, you need higher skills from the operators of the water system. And of course, you need skilled people to maintain the monitoring and metering facilities, which are now much more advanced than ever. So you might need some change in the manpower in the utility, and you have to take this into account.
That makes sense. So so you mentioned being able to utilize the digital twin for multiple applications, and for it to be cost effective. I think you mentioned that as one of the aspects here, and I heard also about some of the operational cost reductions on energy and the use of labor, which are clearly also examples of cost reduction that we have seen as an ongoing theme. I'm curious to hear from the team if you have heard of any utility tracking these KPIs on return on investment over multiple years and reporting those in a consistent fashion. Are you familiar with that being done in a regular way by any of the utilities that you're familiar with?
Louis, which KPIs are you talking about?
So we're talking about the return on investment specifically, ways of measuring, you know, a utility understanding, keeping track of what would they have, how much investment they are getting from the digital twin implementation that they have over time. Katie, you had something, you had an idea to share?
No, sorry. I was just saying my own experience, especially well, we all know who I used to work for in the UK. It was more important to, because obviously there you submit a business plan and then there's a 5-year investment cycle. I think you're probably aware of the AMP structure, right, in principle. And it was very important to complete your business plan, and then the reflection on the business plan was pretty much non-existent. Yeah, so no, it's a fair point as far as return on investment. Obviously in Ireland's, well, they're on the EU's bad list for drinking water compliance. Irish water is very new; it's a couple of years old, right? So they're so not there yet. Like they're still fixing fundamental issues like untreated sewage and inadequate disinfection. So it's a couple of years away yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just seems like sometimes we might get a little bit bullish with the technology at the beginning, but then you know, we sort of, once we prove that it works, then we just let it run. There was one interesting situation of a utility in Germany that implemented a operation optimization for their treatment plant. And after they implemented their system, their electrical bill actually went up, and you know, they were obviously pretty upset about that fact. But the part that they have, after they were digging more into the information, for example, calculated the specific energy for treating per load of COD that they were getting. They came up to understand that it went up because there was an ice cream factory that opened in town that dramatically increased the amount of load that treatment plant was getting, but their actual specific energy to treat water went down, right? So, but it could have been just a public disaster for them without understanding exactly what was actually happening, right? So that's why I think it is critical that that utilities figure out, even if it is in the software, you know, quantify the impact of this digital twin, so that the business cases can be built more easily.
I think Lewis, sorry, can I just chip in there? I think you make an interesting point, because, you know, one of the things that we, if you like, our USP as a business is digital business twins. So we don't just model the asset base, we model the context in which the asset base operates. And I think that's really important. So, you know, understanding, you know, the legislation, the regulations that affect the performance of the organisation, and also things like population growth and severe weather events, and all of that can affect how well the assets are able to deal with their, you know, or deliver their purpose, in effect, is critical to the success of that solution. So just sort of returning to your original point, you know, we do track ROI and we do track benefits when we do an implementation, because, you know, from our point of view, that's critical to the next engagement. You know, we want to build a long-term relationship with the client. So, you know, that is, you know, we do focus on what is the business problem, you know, and whilst we don't cover all of the elements of the asset base, we do try and identify the critical data components that underpin the decisions, so that we really focus on those. And I think in turn, and I think this plays into a previous conversation, that informs the criticality of the data that you need to collect within your business process. And this needs to be a sort of a cyclical process where the digital twin actually identifies the critical data, and then you return to the business process to ensure that you get good governance around the collection of that data, so that you can improve the integrity of the model, and it becomes almost like a symbiotic, a positive reinforcement, symbiotic relationship between the digital twin and the asset. Well, certainly the processes that collect the asset information.
Yeah, no, that is excellent. I think we were talking earlier about how connecting different assets here can unlock more value, right? I think the more that we can simplify and reduce the complexity on how do we manage these assets, that value can be increased. I would love to get, we have our 10-minute warning here. I would love to get your reflections on the barriers to implementation from your guys' perspective to implementing digital twins, aside from being able to create a business case. And obviously here it will strike me that having a quite a diverse background of different geographies, your barriers to implementation might be different. So perhaps we can get started with Yuri. You're on the 5 o'clock of my screen dial here.
Okay, barrier for implementation. I would probably say first things. What?
Right, barriers for adoption.
Yeah, I think I would say that's one of the first barriers. Actually, the expectation of people. You have to be able to manage the expectations, because if you're going to make a digital twin or a model, people expect to get every answer that they ask to the system. And well, that's simply not possible. So managing expectation is quite important. And then related to that, also getting people interested in your system. Because if you're in a utility, it's all cost driven. So basically you have to convince people that they're going to get added value from there, either from time savings or energy savings or whatever. So
great, thank you, Yuri. Makes sense. Tommy, what are your thoughts on breaking down the barriers for adoption aside the business case?
Yeah, so I think the value is quite obvious thing. So you have to get some value from it. So like Yuri said, it's energy or time saving, but then also when it's a cost driven, and then there's what I have also met quite many utilities. So there are also the management. So you have to have the management buy-in to get these things in. So if there are usually quite long journeys, they are working tens of years, and if the guys are quite long been working there and they see new systems, it might be difficult to like buy a new one and come in with that system. So if they don't see the value, and if they don't have like live the digital things, if they are quite not that used to use digital tools, so it can be quite difficult to implement new ones there. So that's one thing. It can be a barrier, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a story of a utility where we wanted to implement the digital twin, and the response was, "Oh, what we need is an empty plastic jug of milk with a pole attached to it, and put it on the wet well. And when we see the flag showing up at the top of the wet well, then I need to turn my pump on, and that's really all what I need, right?" They went on to actually implement a digital twin, but it was a journey. Yeah, they going from the old method of the plastic milk jug to a digital twin was quite a journey. Thank you, Katie, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's some pretty specific challenges over in Ireland. I think one is going to be the lack of the physical infrastructure that you need to do it. The other is the fact that you have a national utility, local government operations, private DBO contractors, and that's, well, 3 different data systems, each collecting different information. And yeah, I think that's going to be a challenge. And just there's obviously a lot of trouble with rural broadband and having good internet connection. Like we have a treatment plant right now that the national telecom provider just pulled out and said, oh, sorry, we can't give you broadband connection. And this thing's supposed to be commissioned in a couple weeks. These things still happen in 2020, apparently.
Makes sense. There is a need for a base layer, right? Some level of maturity in terms of technologies. You need to have BIS, you need to have a model, you need to have connectivity for things, right?
Yeah, I think like to do my thesis, I might have to go back and ask Severn Trent if I can do a problem for them, because I'm just worried that there's too many blockers here right now, but we'll see. I had better luck with something around Dublin. And then knowledge, I'd say, just general knowledge and understanding of people. You know, I say AI right now, everyone's like, oh, how's your robot? You know, so.
Makes sense. Thanks a lot, Katie. Guy, what are your thoughts?
I've got a couple of things I've written down here. So the first one, in a large organization, you often get silos. So it's really breaking down those silos and understanding, you know, the user stories from within there. Because if you don't get that buy-in, you tend to get many different things invented, and a bit of this closed arms around things, and not very much sharing. So if you do start to develop something, it needs to be adaptable until you get that tipping point, I suppose. And then also very, very important that we've found is that there's a lot of foundation work that you need to do up front, because if you haven't got the right sort of asset breakdown structure and things like that, so anything, you know, so ISO 19650 stuff, let's just call it that. If that's not in place, then you pretty much, your digital twin's not going to work properly, or at least it won't be able to grow anyway. So that's really important, and we've been focusing on that. We're quite lucky because we've got a greenfield site, but even then, Anglian Water is an established sort of business, and it's been very difficult to get some commonality.
Thank you, Guy, for your thoughts. Unfortunately, it looks like they're going to close the door in our breakout room here in the next 30 seconds. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for participating on this roundtable. This was super informative. I think I got, at least selfishly, quite a bit of knowledge about what are the barriers to entry on these technologies. And I think, you know, with each year that passes, we're getting that closer. So thanks a lot for your
here today to join the event. And if you can't find that link, just check